For the Conul conference. My name is Susie Bioletti, and it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is Evelyn McAuley. Evelyn is an archivist with a focus on promotion and outreach for special collections at the University of Limerick Glucksman Library. And Evelyn's going to talk about the Bolton Library collection with her title, Rock of Cashel, Two Bishops, a Library, and the University of Limerick. So welcome, Evelyn.
Hi everyone, thanks for the opportunity to speak today. As Susie says, I'll be speaking about the Diocesan Library of Cashel, County Tipperary, which is better known as the Bolton Library. And the reason being, as of the 1st of February this year, this collection came into the care of the University of Limerick Special Collections Department. And this handover was really crucial in order to safeguard the future of the collection, because for many years past it really hadn't been possible to provide a necessary level of care and management for the collection in Cashel, where it was housed in the chapter house for many years past. And this was despite really the very hard work of many supporters behind the collection for the last few decades. The collection's move to Limerick is a really significant one for us, because it's quite an incredible collection. It's a legacy beyond any kind of price. Its items are rare, they're unique, they're distinctive, and they give us fantastic insight into the beliefs and the thoughts and the interests of its 18th century collectors. But today I'm really going to speak about the collaborative efforts behind making the Bolton Library a library once again. We're doing this through preservation, through cataloguing, and I suppose through the provision of scholarly access to the collection. So I'll probably be pretty heavy on the history of the collection to try and give you an idea of why it came to Limerick, why it's with us now, and what our plans are as far as promotion and making it available to a local, a national and an international audience. So to give you a bit of that background, the Bolton Library is one of Ireland's and the UK's most significant scholars' libraries. It's actually in of itself quite a collaborative effort. It's the work of it stems from the collections of two 18th century Irish archbishops, initially William King and later Theophilus Bolton. King was Archbishop of Dublin between 1703 and 1729. He was considered an extremely learned man of his time. He was an avid book collector, and by the time he died, some 6,000 volumes passed to his friend, I suppose, Theophilus Bolton. Equally, Bolton was fanatical about books. He had constructed this Archbishop's Palace in Cashel, and within it he housed his collection in a room that was modelled on Trinity's long room, as you do. And by the time he died, it amounted to some 12,000 volumes. These he willed to the community, or the diocese in Cashel, and according to his will they were to remain there in perpetuity for the use of the future clergy. But unlike, for example, Marsh's Library in Dublin, he didn't leave any provision or any kind of legacy for the future care of the library, and this was really a crucial issue ever since, because right through its history it didn't have any kind of significant income of any consequence really, and it has suffered for it. It also suffered a lot of unrelated issues, probably beginning in 1798, when the collection was actually plundered by soldiers billeted in Cashel to counter the Wolf Tone Rebellion. The first official librarian was Reverend Henry Cotton. He had a really long association with the library, some 40 years, and on his arrival he carried out an assessment, and he found, even at that early stage, that it was in quite a state of neglect. A lot of the volumes were damaged, they were damp and in dire need of repair. But shortly after this, the Church Temporalities Act disestablished the archbishopric in Cashel, and this necessitated a new home. It had to be shipped out of the Archbishop's Palace, and hence the construction of a chapter house in the cathedral grounds, and this was home to the collection right up until this year, between 1836 right up to 2016, before it was moved to Limerick. In 1869, the Irish Church Act disestablished the Church of Ireland, and this led to a really, really long period of decline for the library. In 1909, the post of librarian actually lapsed, and following this, the Dean of Cashel took responsibility for it. Again, a chronic lack of resources really meant that each successive dean struggled to try and maintain it in any kind of good repair. In the continued absence of funding, the library at this period remained open only through combined efforts of fundraising by the dean and also by a small group of volunteers, and also through a false unemployment scheme that was operated by Cashel Heritage. In 1998, the Bishop of Cashel actually transferred the management of the library to a committee, and it was represented by members from the diocese, Cashel Heritage, and the University of Limerick. At this point, the University of Limerick agreed to provide technical and cataloguing and academic support for the collection, while on the other hand, Cashel Heritage agreed to support tourism, visitor matters, and assist in the day-to-day running of the library. And in 2003, as kind of a practical expression of the partnership between UL and the church in Cashel, the UL librarian was given a certain amount of time each week to carry out an assessment. During this time, with the help of a false unemployment scheme workers and also a group of volunteers, they were able to remove a lot of the books that were affected by damp, clean them, and put them in order. But again, a lack of funds on a running theme continued to plague the library. In 2007, the Heritage Council published this conservation plan, and in it, in a lot of detail, outlined the issues that were affecting the library. All really stemming again from a lack of resources, inadequate staffing, a lack of curatorial policy and documentation, and very unsuitable environmental conditions. A review of the building found that the environment was cold, it was damp, it was subject to local fluctuation, all of this leading to rapid deterioration of the books. If they were to survive for the future, they needed a suitable environment with humidity, temperature controls, and secure monitoring and management. In 2010, the OPW proposed to take the library into the care of the state, but without the necessary funds to actually carry out the repairs on the library building itself and to manage it into the future, this didn't go ahead, and an alternative proposal was made to move the library to Limerick. As I mentioned, this move took place earlier this year. It was quite an extreme, complex undertaking, and it was one that UL took a lot of care to execute. They actually hired the services of a restoration group in the UK. They came over, they unshelved the books very carefully because they were so fragile. They wrapped them in acid-free tissue and they packed them in these book crates for removal to Limerick, where they now reside in the Special Collections Department in appropriate conditions. Just to give a really, really brief indication of the significance of the library, currently it amounts to somewhere between 11 and 12,000 items. We're not quite sure because it hasn't been catalogued in detail. The Bloomfield and Potts Directory of Rare Books noted its many items of great rarity, at least 50 not recorded elsewhere in the world, some 800 not recorded elsewhere in Ireland. It's comprised of printed works, fine bindings, maps, letters, original manuscripts in Conabule, the most significant of which is probably an uncoloured copy of the Nuremberg Chronicle from 1493. The earliest manuscript dates from the 12th century. It has a 13th century binding of deerskin over oak. It contains seminal works from Dante, Machiavelli, Homer, and so on. And these are fantastic examples of the work of the great continental printers during the 16th and the 17th century. And a lot of these volumes hold library stamps on the interior, and they give indication of provenance. Some of the former owners identified include Catherine of Aragon, Abraham Ortelius, who was cartographer to Philip II, Francis Bacon, the philosopher, not the painter. So it's definitely a really rich resource, both in Ireland and also in an international context, and it's one for which collaboration has been at the core for the last few decades. For over 19 years, the Cashel Heritage and Development Trust operated a community employment scheme, and they made sure that the local community and visitors had access to the building. They could see some of the books on display. They also facilitated school groups trips, which is lovely. And while visitors couldn't actually handle the books, they could certainly see the value and the significance of the library. As the representative church body was not in a position to provide any professional staff to carry out preservation or access or any of those kinds of functions, they made a decision to loan the library to the University of Limerick. And it wasn't really a decision they took lightly, because obviously it meant removal of the books from their community in Cashel, which is not ideal, but it was definitely kind of a last option, kind of. To make this loan binding, the University of Limerick has signed an agreement with the representative church body of Ireland to preserve the collection. And a very key consideration in crafting this loan was the strong relationship that had grown between the Cashel community and the collection. So, as a foundational principle for the agreement, it was a decision was made that UL would assist in developing an exhibition in Cashel town based on the books. So the exhibition is really to be a window onto the collection in Cashel. It'll provide the community with a modern interpretation of the books and the manuscripts collected by Bolton King. And it will also provide visitors with an opportunity to learn about the history of the collection and the ongoing conservation of the books. UL will be responsible for actually selecting the materials to go on display, and also work collaboratively with the church body and the local community in fundraising initiatives to try and develop it in the long term. So the exhibition should be a really strong means of retaining the links between the community and the library. The OPW is responsible for the Rock of Cashel. This is where the collection was housed for many, many years. So it seems fitting that that connection be revived. The town of Cashel has always really struggled to actually get visitors to the rock into the town itself. So it's hoped that if this exhibition is developed and it's promoted properly, that it could act as a good magnet to draw traffic into the town. Cashel Heritage is actually also interested in taking a role as possible promoters and tour guides for the collection again, so it would be nice if they could do this. In a sense, it would be returning the collection to the community again. But agreement on a facility to house the exhibition is kind of paramount, and to that end, Tipperary County Council have muted the former tax office on Friar Street in Cashel as a possible venue, but if it does go ahead, it needs very extensive refurbishment and repair to bring it up to the standard of a modern day museum. But it is hoped that the Office of Public Works and Tipperary County Council can work together to try and bring this to fruition. It's definitely recognised that all of the parties involved have the necessary skills and expertise to deliver on this vision for the exhibition, but the real challenge is to try and coordinate all of this goodwill into some kind of sustainable entity to care for the Cashel exhibition in the long term. So in that vein, Beatrice Kelly, who is Head of Policy and Research at the Heritage Council, made the suggestion of establishing some kind of interpretation framework plan. She made this suggestion on the basis that with any kind of collaborative initiative, there is huge scope for misunderstanding when there's so many different parties involved and they all have their own objectives, priorities, and so on. But it's hoped that by incorporating such an interpretation framework that we might be able to negate some of that. And the intention with it is not for a really expensive consultant-led plan, but just for a really simple, straightforward document that can guide the evolution of the exhibition in Cashel. It could also possibly help avoid investment in unnecessary display or exhibition materials, and possibly act as a really useful tool for fundraising. The overall purpose, though, is really to get clarity amongst the main players, being the Church of Ireland, UL, Tipperary County Council and Cashel Town, on the main objectives of the exhibition and the respective roles each party will play in bringing that together. The document may also outline the contents of the exhibition, the main stories to tell, what kind of themes we can pull out, whether there's a link to the World Heritage bid. The actual writing of the plan would definitely require an individual that has necessary experience to liaise with all of the different parties involved and draw up a strategy as it emerges. As far as the timeline, we're looking at something between 6 weeks and 6 months, depending on how long it takes to get agreement on roles and responsibilities. Currently, the collection is being stabilised. It's being cleaned item by item. It's undergoing analysis for repair and remediation, and we're recording the condition and the structure of each volume as we move through the collection. Very slow, very labour-intensive process, but very necessary before we can make the collection available. On completion, the Bolton Library will absolutely need considerable ongoing investment for conservation, for cataloguing, for promotion. But UL is very committed in the long term to working collaboratively to support and develop the collection and to bring it up to a modern standard as a research facility for public benefit. So I hope I've given some indication of the value and the significance of the library and what we're trying to do in terms of promoting it and making it available. Delighted to answer any questions you might have. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. It certainly is. We were already nearly at capacity, and it definitely necessitated a lot of rethinking. But considering the significance of the library, there's never any question that we wouldn't make space for it. Yeah.
Just for the sake of the live, just repeat it. Okay. Oh yeah, because the Bolton Library had such a vast amount of material in it, I wondered, was the issue of space an issue at UL?
It absolutely always is an issue for any special collections, I think, but considering it was such a priority and such an amazing collection, there was never any doubt that we wouldn't do what was necessary in order to make the space for the collection.
Oh, yeah.
Hello. I just wondered what happened to the building it came out of.
At the moment, it's sitting empty. As yet, there are no plans to develop it further. Simply, again, running theme, lack of resources. So, as far as what their plans are in the long term, I'm not aware.
This lady was just before you.
Hi, thank you very much for that excellent presentation. Barbara McCormack here from Maynooth University Library. And I really see a lot of parallels between what you've accomplished and achieved in this project and what we've recently undertaken in Maynooth University Library, in that we've recently acquired a Church of Ireland collection from Kilkenny, the St. Canice's Cathedral Library collection, which, although it is smaller, it's about approximately 3,500 works. It was owned by two archbishops, and it seems to have a lot of the same kind of works that you've spoken about. So I would think there's definitely some kind of scope for collaboration, maybe something that we could maybe work on in the future, in terms of the collections and in terms of the, I suppose, comparisons between both our institutions in terms of these really exciting and relatively new acquisitions, and also the ongoing collaboration with the representative church body, which again Maynooth University Library collaborated with in terms of the St. Canice's Cathedral collection. So again, just to say thank you so much for the observations.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And it would be very nice to collaborate on something in the future if that was a possibility.
Wonderful to hear, yeah.
Thanks. Evelyn, Hugh Murphy, also from Maynooth. Can I just ask you, you spoke a lot about the community and engagement with the community. What ideas do you have in making sure that this wonderful collection is engaged with by the academic community on campus?
I don't expect there will be any fear. They are already queuing up to access the collection, to be honest. We're hoping we can make a portion of the collection available for access within the coming year, at a conservative estimate. There are quite a few experts in the area of early literature, so they're really quite enthusiastic, and it's a case of fighting them off at the door rather than having to encourage them to come and access the materials, fortunately.
I just have one question, taking up the question about the library, the chapter house. Prior to that, it was in the Archbishop's Palace
Correct.
with a library that looked like the Long Room.
I believe it was the long. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do we know if that still exists as well? That building
It does, yes.
Yeah, right.
Part of the Rock of Cashel. That's
with the library
yep,
space still.
Yep.
I think that question about heritage buildings and heritage libraries, the architecture of libraries, is a very interesting one, and also an aspect that needs preservation. But as we know, the spaces often aren't suitable in the long term, so
No.
it's a brave decision to take a library out of context, out of its original home, put it into a new one. So
Yeah,
but
brave but necessary.
Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you.
If there are no more questions, I think we should just thank Evelyn very much for
You're very
giving us
welcome.
such an
Thank you so much.
interesting presentation.